Welcome back to Arise Prime Time. I'm Charles Adeniyi. Now, earlier at the top of the program, we marked the death and life of Mikhail Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union, who helped end the Cold War and who's died at the age of 91. I was joined by the former British diplomat and research associate at the Centre for International Studies and Diplomacy at the University of London, Dr. Nicholas Westcott, who helped us to remember the man whose reforms played a crucial role in bringing down the so-called Iron Curtain. And later, of course, just now, in fact, we continued our assessment of the public perception of Nigerian politicians and the role they are expected to play in society as the 2023 elections draw near. We spoke there to Senator Emmanuel Orkajev, who reflected on his own personal experiences as a politician. Well, for his personal take on all that and more, I'm joined now for the rest of the program by the political affairs commentator, Arise News analyst, and lecturer at Bayes University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you very much, Charles.
You might have heard us talking about the politicians of Nigeria and the way they are perceived by the public. Did you think they have the trust and respect of voters in this country?
Yeah, I listened to that conversation very well, and I found it very, very interesting. And I want to start with what I think it was Aristotle that talked about when he was talking about the free will of man. You know, that free will is very flexible, very elastic, and of course, man sometimes find it very difficult to moderate that will. You know, but of course, in the course of time, in the course of the development, the evolution of mankind, Thomas Hobbes came and brought about the concept of law. The need for regulation.
Absolutely.
You know, man's tendencies anywhere in the world, whether politician, whether businessman, is actually the same thing. It's about advantage taking, you know, the Machiavellian tendency. But the moderating effect all the time is the place of laws, you know, the place of institutions, whether virtual or actual. Virtual in the case of law, but actual in the case of practical institutions that we're seeing. In the Nigerian context, the institutions are still very weak. I'm not going to be tired of talking about this. That's why you see, you know, the ultra influence of politicians manifesting in all sections of our life. You know, and of course, it's not just peculiar to the politician, but it could be any other sector, you know, of human endeavor. Laws have to be there to regulate. Institutions have to be there to regulate the excesses of man. You know, but when the institutions are weak, man has a tendency to assume the role of that institution. In Nigeria, that's what we see happening.
That's a very good point.
That's right. That's why you see he was making those points. There's a home, he's under pressure for money, and they tell him that when he's broke, he tells them you know, he's now broke now, and they begin to sympathize with him. It is not his responsibility to provide for individuals or for people, you know, those tokens, those handouts. It's not irresponsible. It is the responsibility of the state, and the state does this through institutions. You know, real institutions that will provide job, that will provide health services, educational services for themselves and the children, etc., etc. But when the state is failing, then the man tends to assume the role of the state. You know, but again, do not forget, Charles, that there's a dialectical relationship between the states, you know, and the state institutions and man. It is this same man that is supposed to strengthen those institutions so that they will have less responsibility as individuals to the people, as the case could be.
That's a very good point.
As the case could be. So that's the lacuna. And I saw it very clearly in his analysis. He's an innocent politician, you know, acting his own part, playing his own part as an individual. It is not essentially his responsibility, but as a leader, he is also part of that process of building institutions. But just that he cannot do it alone.
Yes,
there has to be that collective realization.
And in the interim,
that's right,
those people, I mean, something has to be done.
Something has to be done. That's why he's intervening. He's standing in the gap. You know, but standing in the gap, it's an anomaly, and that's why you see pressure on the political leaders. I mean, even you, I'm sure you face that pressure. Individuals send account details to you. You know, can you help me? My child is sick. I'm broke. I need to pay school fees. Can you? Those things are not supposed to be. They are not supposed to be like that. Sometimes we misunderstand this as saying that okay, we are being communal, we are taking care of ourselves. But most times you find out that you cannot cope. You are stretched because you have your own needs. You know, because the state is failing, or the state has failed. No, the state has not failed really, but because the state has failed to be responsible in terms of
in certain aspects.
In certain aspects. So the pressure is coming on individuals who are supposedly privileged. You know, and of course they have have their own pains too. But it's a contradiction that we'll continue to cope with until we.
Well, it's a very good analysis,
country,
and in that context that these politicians find themselves, people then make assessments of whether this politician is good or bad.
That's right.
And the general impression appears to be that most of them, I mean, that there is the sense that they're just there to help themselves. Do you think that perception depends on the particular politician? Because, I mean, we're seeing, for instance, a lot of apparent confidence in someone like Peter Obi, and maybe a couple of the others.
Absolutely.
Comparative confidence, because not everyone sees him in that light of being a bad sort of egg.
We're just seeing him, like a light, for instance, and of course, because of the influence of the individual leaders, of course, we are now left with no option other than identifying the good, the bad, and the ugly. But in any case, they too, are under pressure. But if, for instance, their roles are downplayed, through a conscientious, painstaking effort at strengthening the institutions, they will begin to look less from them, and that's why you see.
I have to just mention, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I have to mention that we're not supporting any candidate.
No, we're not supporting. We're talking generally.
People saying, you're talking.
Yeah, and that's
because, I mean, it's all I mean, not everyone likes Peter Obi. There are some people who think that Atiku is better, some people think that Tinubu is better, some people think that Kwankwaso is better, of the four sort of front runners. So please continue.
I see, there's no part of the world where you say you don't see some excesses of politicians. I mean, we saw it in the United States through the intransigence of Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
And I've said it repeatedly. If not,
we also saw it in the UK.
In the UK.
I mean, they've had to get rid of their prime minister.
If not for the strength of the institutions in those countries. So in that country, but in the US, for instance, Donald Trump will have maybe succeeded in torpedoing or discrediting that election and continuing in power. Don't forget, there was a particular time, even his Attorney General was not too sure if there was going to be a handover. That's the first time we're going to see that kind of a thing in the US. And look at what the onslaught on the Congress in the almighty United States of America, the bastion of democracy.
And that touches on the point that you're making, that if you don't have institutions, people are entirely corrupt.
Yeah, when there's no institution, the man rules. The man rules, because the strength of the man will break down the institution. And that's why we'll see in developing, evolving democracies in Nigeria, in Africa, and in some Asian countries. But those ones are the Asia and the Pacific. Those ones are even rising. But of course, we still have a prevalence of it in sections of Africa.
Donald Trump would do very well in Nigeria.
Of course, of course, people say that his trace looks like that of a typical African leader. Even if it may not necessarily be so. It was just meant to deride us. But they are not too far from the truth anyway.
Yes, absolutely. Do you suppose that all that disaffection with politicians, rightly or wrongly, is blunting us to their importance as the people society depends upon? And I think the senator mentioned that, for social, political, and economic progress. And so the sooner we keep a closer watch on what they do, rather than being weary of them, the better for all of us.
Yeah, first of all, Charles, I think, even with their analysis so far, I don't think that all the politicians are bad. We have quite a number of them that are fantastic.
Well, it's the perception, that we're
fantastic individuals. And you see them trying to do their best. Even in the maze of these imperfections that we have seen over the years, we have seen some outstanding politicians excelling on their meat as ministers, as governors. Perhaps we shouldn't narrow it down by mentioning names, but there are some shining examples. Which means that if we have more of them, trying to be exemplary, in the performance of their duties, of course, we will not be where we are. The institutions will turn out to be strengthened, and we have seen some politicians, to some leaders, making deliberate effort, to build very strong institutions. So it's a matter of time. How well will an average leader be able to galvanize the populace, to see the others first above the self? And several times I've always talked about the concentric circle of leadership. In our own situation, we tend to favor people, in the inner ring, whereas we're supposed to favor people in the outer ring. When we get to power, we think of our friends and relations first, rather than the others, rather than the community. But rather we're supposed to start from the outer ring, the community, the society, before we begin to talk about friends and family. If we're focusing on friends and family members, acquaintances, it's just simply nepotism.
Absolutely.
It's cronyism. And of course, it has, it does a disservice, to merit, to productivity and efficiency, value adding, for a progressive nation where you see growth and development. It takes some other kinds of ability to realize these things. A kind of
but do you think that
altruistic
process
leader.
has begun? I mean, this time as we head towards 2023, we've got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, we are seeing signs in some politicians, really, although we cannot really tell. We just mentioned Peter Obi now with the groundswell of opinion around him, and it's coming from not necessarily his achievements in Anambra State, because some people have controverted it, but in his pronouncements, and of course, he will tell you, go and verify. It has become a cliche, go and verify. And we have not seen anybody coming to effectively countermand him that he didn't do all those things, that he didn't make savings in Anambra. I mean, how many people, how many leaders, will make those kind of humongous savings, leave those kind of monies behind? Well, we cannot tell yet, but we're just making some kind of deductions, So we need leaders, that will be altruistic, that will rise above the fray, once more, not remind us of our differences, elevate themselves above our classifiers and dividers, so that they will make their name, etch their name in gold, rather than being seen as people who just look at themselves, favor their families and friends alone,
Superb stuff, as always. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is the political affairs commentator, Arise News analyst, and lecturer at Bayes University in Abuja. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Charles.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja and around the world. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.